If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. On November 8th, Oregon voters voted to change the Constitution to make healthcare a fundamental right. The American College of Sports Medicine promotes that exercise is medicine. In this episode, Dr. Armstrong and Corbin Bruton discuss how these are flawed ideas and how focus needs to shift from universal healthcare to universal health. We contend that exercise is not medicine and that equitable and accessible exercise is essential to reducing the growing cost of healthcare and the increasing burden of inactivity on society.
As you're aware, we here in Oregon just all submitted our ballots, our voting, and I noticed that Measure 111 actually ended up getting passed. And I kind of started thinking about the time when I was a student and taking your courses in college, and how you would always kind of in front of the class ask us this life-changing question, and that's, why are doctors not prescribing exercise for their patients? Especially with all the study and research out there, how exercise can actually help with a lot of ailments and a lot of illnesses. Why are doctors prescribing medication when another solution can actually be the prescription of exercise? And now with Measure 111 coming out and having that more of affordable, easy access to healthcare for Oregonians, I noticed that how it's written, gym memberships aren't a part of that. And I wanted to pick your brain on that subject. And what's your opinion? Let's dive into that.
Okay, well, let's begin by kind of stating what Measure 111 reads for the individuals who might not be from the state of Oregon listening to this broadcast. Essentially, what it's doing, it's amending the Constitution. So the Constitution will now read under Section 47(1), it is the obligation of the state to ensure that every resident of Oregon has access to cost-effective, clinically appropriate, and affordable health care as a fundamental right. I have a lot of concerns for this. I voted against it, and unfortunately, nearly half of the state voted one way and the other half voted the other way. And it was just edged out in terms of, I think it was only about 20,000 votes or so difference that cost it. But what I feel they're not aware of is the cost of healthcare, where we're at already, and the cost that inactivity has and obesity has on providing that healthcare. And there are no provisions to focus on the fundamental right for health, universal health in this state and elsewhere. And I'm also concerned that there's going to be kind of the dominoes are going to start to fall as other states now follow suit. And it's something that is not affordable. And kind of back to what you talked about with what I've continually presented in my classes, I honestly believe that anyone training for the medical profession should minimally have a reasonable nutrition class and some exercise physiology or exercise science. And unfortunately, that's just not the way it is. It's focused much more on treatment of disease, on the care of the patient, rather than the prevention of disease. And if we look at some of the statistics that kind of back up why I feel the way I feel, coming out of COVID, one thing that a statistic that I had heard was that the percentage of adults aged 18 and over who met the physical activity guidelines for both aerobic and muscle strengthening activity was 23.2%. That's meeting the minimum guidelines. So that's like 150 minutes of moderate physical activity and 2 days of muscle strengthening activity.
Man, that's crazy.
And the guidelines for that muscle strengthening activity is really, really minimal. And then we look at, well, the percentage of adults over the age of 18 who meet the physical activity guidelines for aerobic fitness, it's a little bit better at 53%. But you can also look, the CDC reports that too few Americans get the recommended amount of physical activity. Only about 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 6 high school students meet physical activity guidelines for aerobic and muscle strengthening activities.
That's like mind blowing to me, because don't they have to do PE? Don't they have to?
Well, PE is one of the first things getting cut in schools.
Wow.
As we, consider we're trying to get graduation rates up, and we're trying to meet all these state standards for academic performance. There are no state standards for physical performance coming out of schools. And so
we're not doing presidential testing anymore?
Well, even if they do, it's not linked to any kind of standard that everybody should meet a minimal score on the President's Council on Physical Fitness test. And in fact, the President's Council on Physical Fitness has been watered down over the last probably 2 decades to the point where it's almost meaningless. And when you look at who actually oversees that, it's always a celebrity. At one point, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, which maybe wasn't too bad, but I can't remember who's the chair of that now. But it's always celebrities, and it's not somebody who is actually trained in exercise science who might be actually able to direct some policy that can improve the health and fitness of our population. And when Kennedy first proposed that back in the 1960s, it was a much stronger push to get the American youth healthier. And part of that was they were realizing going into the Vietnam War that soldiers that they were drafting could not meet some of the minimum standards that the military needed in order for performance. And so they were trying to get the American men healthier and stronger so that we had a more fit army. Obviously, I don't want to get America more fit for war. I want to get them more fit for living. But, as we look at some of these other standards, according to the CDC, about 110,000 deaths could be prevented if the U.S. adults increased moderate to vigorous physical activity by even 10 minutes per day. And inadequate levels of physical activity are associated with, get this, $117 billion in annual healthcare costs. Now, we're talking now in the state of Oregon that we're going to make that healthcare a fundamental right, which is going to drive those costs up because, what we're not providing, we are going to have to provide. And so if you look at some of the other states, we actually, I think, are like the 5th healthiest state in the country. To give you a few statistics here for the state of Oregon. National physical activity, and we'll link some of these sites in the program description. But Oregon is ranked fifth in the country with physical inactivity of 18.5%. Utah is the most active with 15.9% of the population being inactive.
All right, Utah.
Yeah.
I thought Colorado would be.
Colorado's number 2.
Ooh.
And Washington, our neighbor to the north, is number 3 at 17.8. Now, this is activity. So you got to figure these states, Utah, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, have beautiful parks and hiking and things like that. And so that does allow for a little bit more activity. And I think some of that gets more recorded as the activity. I would guess, and particularly in the state of Oregon, that those standards are not as great as you would think on a daily basis. If we really look on a day-to-day basis, are the people in the state of Oregon meeting a healthy level of activity? Not just simply going out, because at 150 minutes, you can go out for a 3-hour hike at the end of the week and say, I met the minimum standards. Well, that's not going to help you health-wise if the rest of the week you're sitting on your ass, right? And so most of these states, Montana is number 6, Vermont is number 4, Hawaii number 8. So these are all states that, generally lend themselves to being a little bit more active. At the bottom, we see number 50 is Kentucky with 30.6%, Mississippi with 30%, and West Virginia with 29.7%. And so we have a pretty wide range of levels of activity across the country, and some more active than others. Definitely got an issue with lack of activity. Oregon, if you look at some other kind of core factors that we talk about, they actually do better than many of the other states. But you look at the numbers, like insufficient sleep. Percentage of adults who get insufficient sleep is about 28.3% of the population.
In Oregon?
Yeah, in Oregon. And that's considered pretty good. Physical inactivity is kind of next on the core measures of impact on our health. Again, we're at 18.5%, which one thing I find interesting is that you scroll down to exercise, percentage of adults who exercise is 24.9%. That's a higher percentage than meeting the physical activity guidelines, and it doesn't make sense to me because exercise is a subcategory of physical activity. So by any logical sense, it would seem like exercise should be lower than physical activity. So I'm not quite sure how they're measuring those standards, which again also tells me that we have issues with how as a nation we promote and encourage exercise amongst our population. We do a little bit better than most states in terms of smoking with 13.3%. But these are all behaviors that can be modified to improve one's health. And that should be the primary focus as we look at trying to improve the healthcare system in this country. Let's get, if you take a fraction of $117 billion and put it towards making health and physical activity easily accessible to all individuals, addressing the disparities. And there are definite disparities in there. I get pushback a lot of times from people saying, oh, you're pushing, people can't help it that they're obese. People can't help it that they're in activity. And I understand that. And I understand that there are challenges. But to just say, okay, well, we're just going to let the population continue to get fatter and fatter, to get less and less active, and we're just going to treat it with a pill, treat it with, surgery. Somebody gets obese, we just government will pay for bariatric surgery. It's just, to me, it's completely irresponsible for us to think that we can just live our lives as we wish, and in some cases, as we're not able to live. We're not able to be healthier. And so we just kind of succumb to the fact that my community doesn't make it possible for me or my job or, whatever my status is. And so I'm just going to have to resolve myself to being unfit and unhealthy. That's a big issue.
Do you think it also has to do with education? Like, just you reading these statistics, the stats, they don't necessarily make sense as far as that subcategory. So things, maybe the information that we are either gathering or providing to individuals, maybe that's a little, contradictory of each other. So for example, you mentioned that people in the healthcare should take either an exercise class and a nutritional class. Well, with nutrition,
I actually would prefer that anybody going to medicine would go through an exercise science program instead of biology or chemistry or some of the other routes that people will take. And I know that some of my colleagues on campus might not agree with me on that, but I know there are universities, one institution that I'm very well associated with, one of their faculty members in exercise science told me that their medical school has told him that they prefer the people coming out of the exercise science program because, and this is a quote, quite frankly, biology doesn't get it. And what they mean is they don't not focused on the idea that we can prevent more of these health issues, and we should be addressing them before the people get to that point. I mean, you look at the stuff that is preventable.
Diabetes.
Yeah, I mean, there's
heart issues.
Yeah, if you look at just meeting the regular physical activity, at least 150 minutes a week is associated with a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, such as heart disease and stroke, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, including bladder, breast, and colon cancer, dementia, as we've talked about a fair amount on here, anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
These are all things that have skyrocketed through COVID.
Well, it's not only the physical health, it's also the mental health too, just by that alone, right?
And that's, I mean, you look at the increase in the rates of anxiety and depression in this state alone during COVID, and you can't get access to reasonable mental health care. I mean, look in the streets of our cities, but those are the worst extremes. There are also people who are just living day-to-day lives that have anxiety issues, they have depression, and they have no access to the care that can help them to minimize that. But we can very easily put some of these dollars towards changing our communities, making them more walkable, making them more bikeable, providing community gyms, and putting physical education back in the schools. I mean, this is stuff that doesn't cost much. What did we do during COVID in this state? We closed the gyms and then told people, to stay inside.
Right.
And so people weren't out being active. They weren't going to the gym. And of course, inactivity levels skyrocketed. People gained weight. People got unhealthy. And we did nothing to fix that. But, we gave free vaccines and that kind of stuff. But it also demonstrated that our healthcare systems were overwhelmed with people who were sick because they didn't have the immune capacities to be able to combat the virus.
Right. So living a healthy lifestyle can combat items like COVID. We got the new RVS virus that's going around, the respiratory one that's going around right now. Diabetes, doing cardio creates more gray matter in the brain, which helps with the delay of dementia. Just all in all, I could not agree more with you. I think we should be focusing on more exercise, more of that active lifestyle. We've talked in this podcast, starting young with resistance training that carries forward into your not only adult years, but your geriatric years, right? Just the benefits of picking up a couple dumbbells and lifting it's way better, in my opinion, than a lot of the medication that's out there.
It's way better than all the medication that's out there.
Right.
I mean, the medication, when we talk about medicine, we're talking about treating disease. So we're talking about relieving symptoms. We're talking about trying to cure a condition. And there are many conditions that exercise is not going to prevent, but it can improve the prognosis. It can, improve the treatment. It can help benefit the treatment. I mean, even the vaccines. People who are of a healthy body composition and healthier physical activity levels have a much better vaccine response than people who are obese and inactive. That's in the literature. I mean, it's like, why does the medical profession ignore this stuff? And even within the field of exercise science, I mean, you're familiar with the American College of Sports Medicine and their promotion that exercise is medicine. This week as I was driving into work and they were talking on the news about the passing of ballot measure 111, and it just got me thinking, that no, exercise is not medicine. Why are we saying that it is? Because we're equating ourselves with this back-ass method of helping people where exercise is on the front end, it's on the preventative end, it is what is providing us with that potential for universal health. And so if we can get through more cost-effective measures of getting people active, managing their body weight in healthy fashion. And we're not talking everybody's got to have six-pack abs and all that kind of stuff. We're not talking about fat shaming, which I was telling my students this week, I get accused of that a lot because I bring up the role of obesity in disease. And I have colleagues that think, oh, you talk too much about obesity. It's like, yeah, I do, because it's a horrible problem that we need to fix. And if we can fix it, we're going to cut medical costs tremendously. But if we put a little bit more of that money toward trying to get people healthy, we're going to have healthier people, and healthcare costs are going to go down. And where we need care, people who have conditions that are outside of their control, or congenital disorders or acquired disorders that have come because of the environment or factors outside the control of that individual, those should be treated, and then people should have the best access to those. But what's preventing them from getting that adequate treatment is that we have so many others who are demanding treatment for things that can be controlled. And so how do we go about as a society fixing it so that everybody has access to health, not just health care?
Well, what you said there is it's really important that people need to think of. We're not shooting down the fact that healthcare shouldn't be readily available for everyone. And I think we're both in agreement. Like, people should have access to good quality healthcare. But if all of us are, for the most part, healthy, fit, and we don't need to go in unless it's those rare circumstances, well, then I feel that because we're coming in and there's less and less people coming in, doctors are going to say, okay, you're not just a number, you're my patient. And I'm not just going to see you for like a 15-minute window and then you get the heck out of here and then I charge you a bunch of money. They're going to say, okay, let's figure out what's going on. I don't know. Let's figure it out together. And so now the quality becomes even better because they don't have to put you in a time slot, in a schedule where it's like, all right, I'm going to see you. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm going to draw your blood. And then I may or may not give you an answer, but here's a bill, right? But now it's like, well, let's focus on the area because you're doing everything else that's right in the rest of your life. Something's out of your control. Let's focus on this together. And I don't have a million patients flooding my door all at the same time. So I can focus on you a little bit longer. Therefore, your quality of healthcare is going to go.
We would hope.
We would hope.
Yeah. And I would like to say, okay, if we're saying we're going to give universal health care, then let's consider if we truly believe exercise is medicine, then it needs to be lumped into that, and everybody needs to have, equitable access to physical activity. And that just isn't happening. I mean, you have disparities both in the rural communities and in the urban communities between the rich and the poor, and those need to be fixed. And those are cost-effective measures to fix.
Well, I do know that speaking of cost effect, I know a lot of gyms that are out there that if you can provide them, that you do have health insurance, either from your work or whatever the case may be, depending on what your health insurance is, they will provide you with a discount. I'm seeing that more and more and more. And some of those insurance plans, I know here in Oregon, and I think it's actually all on the West Coast, with the Providence plan, if you go to a gym for like 20 days out of the month and you ask that gym just to kind of print you off a receipt, your insurance company will actually pay you some, like, for your gym membership, essentially. So your gym membership is free. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, but what about those of us that have our home gyms and, do healthy behaviors? Because a lot of those, we have plans throughout my work, and Providence is my provider, but we have plans where, to sign up and get some of these discounts, you have to make certain lifestyle goals and changes and stuff. And it's like, I don't have anything that I really need to change. I just have to keep doing what I'm doing. And you're excluding me because I'm already doing the stuff that I'm not supposed to. I don't have to quit smoking. I don't have to increase my exercise habits. I mean, I'm doing my share of the minimum physical activity guidelines for probably 5 or 6 people when it really, really think about it. And, diet wise, I don't have to necessarily lose any weight. I mean, I could lose more weight cosmetically, but I don't need to lose it for health. And in fact, probably if I start losing too much more, it becomes more detrimental to my health. So that's not equitable. You're not providing equal access to everybody. You're just, I think, blowing smoke up people's skirts.
I don't think with this House bill or this Measure 111, I don't necessarily know if it is for equality. I think it is more for equity. And because there are a lot of people out there that do have health insurance, but there's also a huge population that doesn't. And I think that is why this ended up getting passed, because, now the state of Oregon provides its own form of health insurance. But again, a cool thing to help prevent those doctor visits or those doctor's appointments or whatever the case may be is exercise, right? Exercise, or take a nutrition course, or, you know what I mean? Why don't we focus on that? It's okay to go see a medical physician. It's okay to see a chiropractor, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, but why can't we see, I don't know, a personal trainer or a group exercise person and a nutritionist? Why can't that be included in the package? Does it come down to money, or does it come down to we have put that portion of the health field on the back burner?
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
I think we've put it on the back burner. And the reality is, you can't provide everybody that level of care. I mean, everybody can't go to a personal trainer. Everybody can't, go to a nutritionist. You have to just provide equitable access. I mean, equality is not going to happen. And there's no such thing as equality when it comes to healthcare, because some people are going to need a lot more than others, just naturally, because maybe they were born with a congenital condition, or, they've been injured, or, whatever reasons may cause somebody to need healthcare. But when we look at how we prevent all of the preventable kinds of conditions, that's where we need to focus in on the areas first that are most inequitable, and look at the poorest communities. And so if you go into poorest communities and provide personal trainers, is that really going to be what they need? No, they just simply need access to things and facilities that are going to be of some benefit. I don't think personal training should be something that the state is providing for anybody, because that's kind of an extra.
It is.
But from the standpoint of educating our population, we have public education. And why is our public education not providing the level of instruction that people need to understand what is healthy eating, what is proper physical activity, and getting that proper level of physical activity? My kids are in a great school district, but I don't think they've had the best physical education that is possible. And I know they probably got better than most schools. And so where are we going wrong in providing that instruction to kids and getting them more active? And then you start looking at, youth sports. There's a lot of disparity in access to youth sports that we could do things to amend as well. So the focus needs to be on getting back to prevention and looking at how we can make everybody healthier rather than trying to make everyone healthy. That makes sense. We're not trying to, we shouldn't be spending so much having to cure people. We should be spending more of our efforts and energies trying to figure out how do we make people not sick in the first place.
Right. So you don't want like a health Band-Aid. You want it to be
I don't want there to be an injury. Yeah. I mean, there should be no need for Band-Aids.
Right.
And again, that's why I'm kind of getting on a soapbox now with my students that exercise is not medicine. It's not medicine. It is a preventative treatment. And until medicine convinces me that they are all about prevention, then exercise is not medicine. Exercise is a way of minimizing the need for medicine and healthcare.
But it's still something that should be prescribed.
Well, yes. And there was a period of time right after about when I got my master's. So it was like in probably the early 90s or so where the American College of Sports Medicine, the exercise science field began to kind of get away from talking about the exercise prescription because we're not doctors. We can't prescribe something. And I was called bullshit to that because it's like, first of all, I have a PhD. I am a doctor. I am not a medical doctor. And as my grandfather always say, PhDs are not real doctors because they can't prescribe medicine. This is coming from a guy who had heart disease and had, just I don't know how many different pills he had to take on a daily basis. And to the point where at one point he had a medical appointment and his doctor prescribed something. And my grandmother, who had a high school education, was like, should he be taking that? Because doesn't that interact with this other drug? I mean, she knew better than the damn physician that he shouldn't be taking these two drugs together. And the guy just kept prescribing stuff. And there was never the push for my grandfather really to stop smoking. There was no sense of needing exercise and things like that. Now, granted, this was in the 60s, 70s, and so on. But, by now, we should be looking at when somebody comes into a doctor's office and they have high blood pressure, they have diabetes, the first thing that we should be saying is not, here, take a pill. We should be saying, look, you need to be increasing your physical activity and you need to be dropping some pounds. You need to lose some body fat. And then, we need to be looking at, offsetting many of these conditions that are associated with the decline in aging by saying, okay, sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, to a small extent is a normal part of aging, but the extent to which we are losing it is not normal, and we need to be doing things to counteract that. And if we had more of that approach, then there would be less need for the medical profession. The medical profession should be able to take a sigh of relief and say, okay, I don't have 100 people in my waiting room trying to get emergency care. I have half a dozen patients who have conditions that are beyond their control, but we can continue to try and treat them and emphasize what we can do medically to make their lives better.
Do you think that also comes down to education, though? I mean,
education where?
Well, because your grandfather, he was just under the assumption that, hey, you're not a medical doctor. I go to a medical doctor to get medication to make me feel better because that's what I've been taught. I go see a doctor and they will tell me what's wrong with me instead of doing that research themselves. Instead of, I know we've come a long way from the 60s. I know we talked that smoking is bad.
Have we really?
Well, I think we have. I think we've talked that smoking's bad. I think we've definitely talked that processed food and microwavable food is bad.
Okay, go to your grocery store and what are people buying?
That is true because there is a convenience because unfortunately we have become so accustomed to that.
In the 60s, there was no microwavable food. Your TV dinners were on little aluminum trays that went into your oven and had to be cooked for like 20, 25 minutes. So they weren't rapid meals that were getting stuck in a microwave. The whole microwave thing really started to develop in the kind of late 70s, early 80s. And we have gotten worse and worse with that. I mean, food might be presented as a little bit healthier, but it is still highly processed, still a lot of crap, a lot of chemicals in there. We've learned a lot more about chemistry over those last 40 years that have made foods a little less healthy.
Well, do you also think that's where exercise would come into play? Because when you're eating these unhealthy foods, you're getting that sugar or the preservative rush. So you're getting that dopamine level. And then when you come home after sitting all day in school, which apparently they don't teach PE anymore, then you come home and you either sit down in front of the TV and zone out, or you're playing video games or computers, or kids are on their phone. They're getting that dopamine rush. And then mom and dad are both working and they come home and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to make dinner. Here, something quick, easy, microwavable. I think we're running out of time, I guess, in our day. We're not becoming as time efficient. You don't think so?
Oh, how are we running out of time in our day when everything that we had to spend more time doing, like for a kid doing homework, they could pull out their phone and there is far more information there than when I was in school.
Right.
When I was in school, elementary school, you have to go get the Britannica encyclopedia off the shelf. Or, if you're doing a term paper in high school and college, we had to go into the library and physically look through books to find the information and make photocopies of it and all that. So we have more time available to us. It is the use of our time that has shifted. We have shifted our time into more entertainment and time wasted. Kids aren't outside playing anymore.
But that's the society that we've become accustomed to. That is the norm.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Now.
But that doesn't mean we have less time. We're not using our time
efficiently,
effectively.
Right.
Not efficiently. We might be using it efficiently, but we're wasting hell of a lot of time. We're probably using, to say efficiency, yeah, okay, well, I can use my time efficiently. It doesn't take me an hour to make dinner anymore because I can just pull stuff out of the freezer, throw it in the microwave, and in 15 minutes, the meal is cooked. That's efficiency. Is that effective? No. And we look at electronics and how kids are spending their time. Rather than being outside playing, they're inside sitting on their computers. And part of that is we have a society that is more fearful about going outside because, again, we're painted this picture that the world is less safe than it was 40 years ago. I would argue that we survived the 60s with no car, no seat belts, no car seats, no helmets on our bikes, and we did okay. We got outside and we played until our parents called us home, and then usually we ignored them for as long as we could until they started really screaming hard at us to get our butts home. Now you got kids having to be pushed out the door to go play. We look at the amount of time we're spending on electronics and what impact does that have on our sleeping. Our quality of sleep is going to be hugely affected by the fact that we're looking at a screen right before bedtime. So how are we more efficient or, any better now than we were 40 years ago?
I don't think we are, but that's what I'm saying. I think as a society, we're not using our time as well as we should. And I think with the dopamine spikes that we're getting from the simulation of the stimulation on the computer screen, we're becoming addicted to that social media, that scrolling motion. They're becoming addicted to that. Plus there's an emotional rush that, in my opinion, I don't think teenagers can necessarily handle that because they're so in the I need to be the hip, the now. What's this person thinking about me? What's that person thinking about me? When in reality, it's let me focus on myself and my health. Mental health is a huge factor, but we've also, you see a lot of people that are like, well, I have anxiety or I have ADHD or I have whatever the case may be. I got to go to a doctor and then get this medication. And I'm not saying that we don't suffer from the mental illness, and I'm not saying that there's not a lot of research that's out there, but there is a way for us to not necessarily accept it, but how can I overcome this? Exercise, in so many literature that's out there, it shows that you can overcome not only the physical, but the mental as well. And you can kind of balance out that dopamine level that you are staring at a screen or staring at social media and getting that rush. You can kind of counterbalance that with physical fitness. You can get that feel good. You can get those endorphins, and you can utilize that. As far as parents go, I think with two working parents, you got both of them that are go, 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 go. You know, my fiance and we're working. I'll leave the house at like 5:30 and I'm not getting home until 7:30 p.m. And same with her. Like there's not enough. We're working so much that the time at home, that quality at home as two adults trying to take care of our adult responsibility, I don't know. And then it's just like, hey, how was your day? Oh, it's good. Okay, well, let's go to bed because, we just got home and we're going to have to do it all over again. That's what I mean about us losing time frame versus how it was in the 50s or 60s, where you just had one person who worked and then you had another individual stay home and they cooked a good, wholesome meal, a good, wholesome dinner, had that ready, and everyone as the family would sit down. There wasn't any distractions. There wasn't any computer dopamine spikes, social media.
You're
What's
really
this person thinking about?
dopamine, aren't you?
Huh?
You're really on the dopamine. There's so many other physiological factors that we could be considering for our health. But
I think it's overlooked. I really do. I'm telling you, I think it's overlooked. I think we are becoming addicted to our electronic devices so much that we are becoming way too dependent on them. And if we could just break that addicted habit and set it down and then focus on our physical health, I really think a lot of things would change.
So what are you doing to age well? You sort of talk about having these long work days. What are you doing to remedy that?
With COVID being over, I'm adding in some resistance training in the evening when I get home. If I have the luxury of not necessarily leaving at 5:30, maybe I'm leaving at 6:30 one day. Well, if I have that luxury, then I will do my resistance training in the morning and then do a little bit of cardio in the evening. Just a little bit here and there, but it's not like how it was when I was doing personal training.
I think that for any of us, if we really, really evaluate our time, we can etch more out. And
Right.
A lot of it is a commitment to time, and this is, again, where exercise is not medicine, but it needs to be prescribed and it needs to be taken on a regular dose like everything else. That, we have to have a normal wake up time, a normal workout time. We know what our work days are, work around that, set aside time. There's no reason why we should be on our screen if we have no time for it. If we're saying we have no time for it. One thing that my wife and I instituted a couple of years ago, we called our 15-minute check-in. That, every evening, as long as, she's in town and, there's no disruption, like, the kids have a sporting event or something like that, we set aside time to just sit down, usually have maybe a glass of wine and just talk about the day. And, the kids kind of give us a hard time because they said, your 15 minutes always turns out to be 45 minutes. That's great when it does that. And sometimes, and more likely, more often recently, the kids have been coming in, and it's kind of like, kids, can we have our 15 minutes before you come in? But, the family's coming in, sitting down. It's really just a matter of making that time. And even doing that, I still have enough time that, I'm wasting time on my computer
Right.
that I could cut. But, I get up 4:30, 5 in the morning, work out, and it doesn't take me too long. It might only be 30 to 45-minute workout. And I get a shower, get all my meals prepared for the work day. And then I get an hour commute each way, work my day, come home. I'm having time to, help coach, with strength and conditioning, shuffling the kids around because I got to, if I'm not staying at the high school, I'm picking up my daughter and bringing her home. And then, I come home, do the sit down, and I still have time to do other stuff and then get to bed at 9 o'clock. So it's really how we prioritize our time. And that's where, we need to be educated on that. We need to develop those practices, and those need to be encouraged rather than discouraged. And I think, again, with this whole just treating everything as medicine, we're treating the problems, we're treating the symptoms and not treating the cause. We're not getting down to the root causes of these things. Why do we have an obesity problem? Why do we have an inactivity problem? What are the issues that we can solve in our communities, in our families, in our schools that will make people healthier? And where there are bigger problems, we need to put the bigger efforts. A lot of communities that are more affluent and have a better sense of planning, which, I don't find Oregon to be the best of planning of states for a lot of reasons. And I get very critical on some of that stuff, but, they don't think ahead to, we have the urban growth boundaries and we're not thinking about what's the impact of growing out our communities without considering activity and, where we place schools and where we place practice fields so that kids that are playing in sports, parents aren't having to shuffle them around. When I was a kid, we could walk to all of our sports practices and things like that because we had communities that were walkable. We had community fields. Sports were localized. They weren't everybody paying big bucks to be on these travel teams that, go all over the place and, get their, sponsorship from corporations that, make them buy all their clothing from them. And we had better mental health, better physical health, and all those things as a result. So it's like, rather than focusing on how are we going to fix the damage, why don't we prevent the further damage and prevent future damage? And we don't have that mentality yet in this state or in this country. And how do we go about doing that? Because honestly, I do think everybody has the right to appropriate medical health care, but the reality is we need to do something both as individuals to take responsibility for our own health, as communities, as states, as politicians, as societies. We need to be taking responsibility for the health of the people and not just pushing off care for hospitals and doctors to be prescribing medications that cost billions and billions of dollars.
So get fit, get exercise, get moving.
Yeah, I mean, and as a society, let's talk about aging well rather than looking at just simply keeping people alive longer. I'm all for everybody living longer and healthier lives, but what our focus has just been, let's just treat the conditions and keep kind of kicking the can down the road. And, maybe we limit the rate at which people become disabled with aging, but we're keeping them going a little bit longer. And then they have to go into nursing care facilities, which, face it, they're not getting care in those either. So how are we going to pay for all that? So if we're going to have an aging society and a society that is going to have the right to health care, then we damn well better be doing something to make sure that we are preventing the decline of their health as they attempt to age well. Is there anything else to add to this conversation about exercise not being medicine?
No, I think exercise is a preventative measure that all of us should be kind of adding to our daily lives, not just necessarily to age well, but also to live well, right? Just add that quality to your life. Add that, get yourself physically fit, get yourself mentally healthy. It all goes together. It all plays a part, and you can take back your life. You don't have to, at some point, you have to wake up and say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? What can I do? Move, grab some weights, lift them, right? Start taking those baby steps. And eventually those baby steps are going to come into nice, confident strides, which are eventually going to just turn into a sprint, and you're going to be rocking it.
Unfortunately, though, I mean, the majority of our population don't even have the opportunity to take those baby steps. And that's the big problem, is how do we make it possible for that fitness journey to begin for individuals and for them to be able to do it safely and effectively? Nobody's addressing that because there's no money in it. There's no money in being, a gym owner, gym trainer. There's much more money in going into medicine or going into pharmaceutical sales because, selling drugs makes a lot more money than promoting health.
Right, but you wouldn't necessarily need a gym membership, correct?
You don't, but
a good majority, even like if people don't want to run in their neighborhoods, right?
Well, why should people run? I mean, again, promoting running is a form of fitness automatically limits a lot of people.
Correct.
You don't have communities that are safe to run. I mean, it's not really even where I live the best place to be running.
But what I'm saying is there are local, if that's the way someone wants to use their baby steps, I just want to either walk around the neighborhood, but their neighborhood's not necessarily safe. A lot of those local high schools will have sporting events that take place after work hours or even before school hours, and they have their track is lit up. And there are communities where people meet up at those tracks and they just walk around it together. So there is those options that are out there.
Yeah,
and as far as
you're talking about individuals that have that access. That isn't everybody. And obviously, very few are taking advantage of that. But if we're going to fix these health issues, you have to make that accessible to everybody. They shouldn't have to go to their nearest high school. There's a lot of communities that most people are not going to be able to easily get to that high school. Our high school here in West Lynn, if I wanted to go from here to run on the track, it's a bit of a drive. Very few people have walkability to that high school track. And there's often so many other sports going on that, that's not going to be accessible to them. So it's more than just, okay, here's the track over there. You need to be using it. We need to be looking at the bigger picture of our communities is how do we make exercise and physical activity a accessible, regular, not even having to go out of your way kind of activity for individuals. And that's where we need to start.
Well, I also think with technology, we've come a long way with that too. Anyone can go to their local, even Target, Walmart. They can grab a couple free weights, right? They can grab.
Everybody can do that.
Anyone can.
And what are you going to go work out in Target? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. You can buy those weights and you can take them home and you can start lifting and you can start doing just a little routine. Or you can also go to, say, YouTube, where they literally have a plethora of free access to workout routines.
Okay.
And you can project it from your phone onto your television set. And you can just do these little workout courses right in the access of your living room.
Okay. Again, you're looking at a percentage of the population that has accessibility to that. You're forgetting about, we have a lot of very impoverished people that do not have phones. They do not have YouTube. They do not have internet access. They do not have a Target in their neighborhood that they can walk to. So it is more than that. It's what are we doing to make it so absolutely accessible
for everyone across
for
the board.
everyone. Yeah.
So what I'm just saying is a majority of people, but you're wanting it for every
Well,
single
that's
person.
the whole point of it, right? I mean, if you're talking equity, you're not just talking about a majority. So the other route you want to talk, the richest, they can access the gyms, they can drive to the gym, they can do that. And then we have, the next layer, they can still kind of go, but they're not going to go to the nicest of gyms. And then the next layer, they can buy their own gym equipment. You start trickling it down. Eventually, you kind of get to a point where there's a big network of that population that it's not accessible to them. And people that are already inactive, dealing with obesity, dealing with health issues, it's not that easy for them to just flip the switch and to start exercising. It's going to take much more of a community focus in order to do that. And instead, we're looking at, okay, we're just going to make the caring of these conditions that we've allowed to be caused in these individuals to be treated rather than how do we prevent them in the first place. And so we need to think about, what are the primary things that are going to limit anybody from getting sick? Stop smoking. So limit smoking. And what do we do in this state? Their source for getting fewer minors smoking is to just raise the smoking age. Well, kids were getting cigarettes at 18. You raise it to 21. You think it's going to be any more difficult for a teenager to get cigarettes? And most of them now are vaping anyhow. So we have no restrictions over that. And then you have exercise, and that should be a fundamental right in the schools. It should be a requirement in our schools that kids are getting a certain level of physical activity because we know they're not getting it at home. Then why not increase the amount that they're getting in the schools? And if it costs us money in terms of funding a PE teacher, funding facilities, it's still a hell of a lot cheaper than the $117 billion we're spending on hypokinetic disease in this country. And then increasing physical activity, making our communities accessible for people to be able to get out and move around and do the things they need to do. And then diet. We need to fix how people access food, how they're taught about food, and how they are taught about the foods that they are eating. We had a box on our counter this morning. My daughter made some pancakes yesterday, and there was Bisquick that said, Heart Smart on the box. I'm like, seriously, we're still calling something like Bisquick Heart Smart? Are we freaking kidding me? That's not Heart Smart. It's still a kind of processed carbohydrate that is not necessarily healthy, especially when you're putting, syrup on the pancakes and all the other stuff. So let's start looking at the things that we can change in our society to make people able to be healthy. And then if people continue to make the decisions that I'm going to live an unhealthy life, and at some point, then we have to start looking at, you're going to have to pay for the cost of we've given you every possibility to be able to be healthy, and you have chosen not to be, then that should be on them, not on the rest of society. If you have, obviously people who have not made the choice, they've tried to be healthy. I mean, some of the people that I have seen have some of the best response through COVID, and been the most active and taken the best precautions were the people who had health conditions that were outside their control, and they did everything they can to protect themselves. They were trying to be more active and everything else. And then other people that, I can just, get this vaccine, or I can, I'll get treated at the doctor's if I get sick, have not taken those efforts to be healthier. I know it's been a bit of a rant for me in this podcast, and I hope people have listened through this all. But, I think it is something that we need to really be considering as communities, as societies, before we just kind of vote changes into our constitutions that we can't afford. We have to look at what is the root problem that we're trying to fix. Is it that people don't have access to healthcare, or is it that people are unhealthy and need healthcare and can't afford it? For many people, yes, there is a lack of access to necessary healthcare, and that needs to be fixed. But for many people, more people, I would argue that they are in need of healthcare that can be avoided, and they are in need of the measures that are going to help prevent that and limit those health issues from increasing within our society. And so we have to kind of fix the problem first, and at the same time be looking at correcting the problem in the worst of the individuals.
Yeah.
And that way we'd be able to age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.